Hi there, welcome back to the Real Matrix Files. Just there's, as I've said before, there's been a few uploads in the last couple of weeks, mainly to do with the Ancient Culture series, where we found, as most do, high coincidence rates across multiple cultures, and interestingly, the findings revealed a worship of the human anatomy, but more specifically the inner brain, which is the major set of glands and structure of the inner brain. I think it could partly explain the high coincidence rate across multiple cultures over a couple of thousand years there, as when you see that multiple cultures are erecting similar structures and creating similar statues and depictions of human beings and little ornaments and things, that it would indicate that they're all looking at the same thing, or they've all seen the same thing, to then decide to create that, recreate it in stone. And that would likely be the inner workings of the brain, since they all match up to those different sections of the brain when they're inspected, and all of these ancient cultures would have done just that, for answers to their origin, what makes them different from the animal kingdom, and what gives them consciousness, as being the only thing that they have that they can utilise to master their domain in a world where they don't really have answers to much else, including right down to why the sky turns as it does. There were no hard science answers for them back then. It would have been a very challenging time, and the only thing that they could refer to was their own bodies. So, and different parts of nature. So, just leading on from that a little bit, I just wanted to quickly mention that I received a comment the other day from someone on a completely unrelated thread topic. And it was sort of one of those typical troll comments where they quickly peep your page and they have a look at what it is that you're doing, and they take a shot at it. The comment was quickly deleted, but it sort of described, without them knowing anything about it. And every other time that has happened to me, it's turned out that I was right. And it ends up coming across as very strange that right at the moment where a research finding is announced that there's a targeted attack from within the system by somebody who drops a comment like that, completely unrelated to whatever it is that you're talking about somewhere else. Excuse me. So, as shocking as that can be sometimes, it sort of smacks me right between the eyes, and I get a little dark spot there, because those sorts of attacks on the internet attack the brain, and these optic centres, which is pretty much what the ancient Egyptians focused on, and leads into what we've also been discussing, which is the simulation and simulated reality, and the impact of an airborne internet in our airwaves, and the impact that has on the human brain. It's all a very severe form of psychological abuse, and most of it is filled with American-based media that has developed over time to become a Western media. So A couple of other things that I found is that in understanding the science behind the optical centres of the mind and the difference between our two physical eyes and our mind's eye, which is where the images are formed, translated and formed, is that the degree of the assault that we're under by mobile internet, our understanding of it becomes even more acute, and it's very difficult to accept and to tolerate. It should enrage any normal, healthy person. The science, actually, it's not possible to disagree with it because it's so basic. And it is really a case of the forest for the trees, once we step back and actually take a look at the very simple anatomy of things and our environment being filled with airborne media all the time in a coded form, and how the brain learns that information and learns how to interpret, and we understand that we're really having our whole optical centre being overwritten, inhibited and overwritten with something else. It's very psychologically challenging, because we're looking at a situation where we're mentally caged, and the only way out of it is to get rid of all the cell towers and turn everything off and get rid of iPhones. So there is no mobile internet. And we go back to using fibre optics. Which is a closed signal. It's a protected signal through cable. And the reality of that is that the big companies who profit billions of dollars a year, the telecommunications providers, are not going to be interested in that at all. Most of big tech would feel put out and lie and say that too many people will lose jobs or they'll lose their income, which is not true, because the internet is accessible through another means, which is fibre optic protected signal. And the justification for having mobile internet is not there. It's simply not there for anybody, perhaps in emergency, say, except those in emergency types of situations, emergency services, those sorts of things. And even then, that goes back to the old pager system, or however you want to do it. I mean, there are ways of getting out of it, but the sad reality is that it does appear to be the case that the ancients were right. The only way out of here at this point is death, and we are subjected to the horrendous torment of these reptiloid, cold-blooded, selfish, money-worshipping Time Lords who understand nothing of the truth or the real nature of our universe, but like to think that they're in charge and they run things and they can use the human race as a slave race, which is exactly what they're doing, and pass themselves off a bit like Elon Musk does, as the caring about the good in the world, and then in the next breath making comments that clearly indicate that he sees human beings as a slave force. So, and producers of consumers, which is really what keeps all of those guys afloat, is the consumer set. Corporations, it's all very sickening, especially when the reasons for this technology are not justified to begin with. So adding on to that, there's research findings, there's psychological complexities, there's simple science, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we already knew and a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't. So another thing that I found interesting is that there are a lot of volcanically formed walls, stone rock walls, which form under layers of the earth, or perhaps over it, and over thousands of years they get covered with dirt, and then they get uncovered with erosion. And a lot of these volcanic walls end up, to begin with, come out sort of cracked and looking like stone blocks, all on different angles, and then after thousands and thousands of years they're all polished over, and it looks like they were tightly fitted and everything because other sediment has fallen in and smoothed over and built up, and it looks like a wall that somebody has constructed, or indeed a dwelling that somebody has constructed, or huge megalithic stones that may be the remains of eroded volcanic eruption that was originally rock and has simply eroded over time to appear as if they were individual stones placed there by a civilization. And the fact that these megalithic structures and whatnot are all at what is commonly understood to be significant places on the earth. Some people call them ley lines, or that sort of thing, sacred sites. In that we don't really have a good grasp on precisely where some of these volcanic eruptions ended up as the earth was forming, whether they were covered in ice, how long they've been there for. The carbon dating is pretty accurate, and most of us know that some of this volcanic rock is millions of years old, or more recently hundreds of thousands. So that's what I noticed about one of the walls in America, which I couldn't understand how it was jutting out from what was essentially a hillside with a creek at the bottom. And I couldn't figure out how lava is supposed to get through the hillside and jut out like that all by itself without sort of spilling everywhere. And then it's all stone blocks. It's all been cracked and it's stone blocks, and it looks like somebody built it. But what I then realised is that the surrounding hillside would have probably covered it at some point, and it's underground lava flow that has sort of seeped up to the top. And then over time, the surrounding hillside has worn away from it to expose the hardened lava rock, which of course over time has cracked into stone blocks. And that's probably by nature of the type of rock that it is, where if you crack it in one spot, it's going to produce a straight line. And sort of split all the rest of the way down just because of its structure. So I also found that very interesting because it's sort of, on the one hand, it brings a lot of things into doubt about some of the megalithic structures and some of the sacred sites as to whether or not they were placed there by anybody, those giant stones, or whether they are the remains and of volcanic flow that has simply eroded over time to leave what looks like standing structure or tall standing stones. And this is not to say that is the case. It's just to say that there are some that maybe are perhaps the result of that type of formation, which to the eye, the human eye, in a modern era, we would assume that they were placed there or that it was built, until we sort of look at the geological aspect of hundreds of thousands of years of movement and volcanic eruption and erosion, to sort of ask whether or not that could have possibly been the case in that particular spot. And some of them end up looking like certain structures and walls that are in Peru with all the different angles of the stones, which can be formed by volcanic rock all by itself. And at the same time, those walls can be built by Peruvians in ancient Peru, but may have originally been much coarser type of rocks, smaller rocks that are much coarser. And over time, they have eroded in the wind and the rain to sort of come up looking polished and all filled in, and you can't fit a cigarette paper between them because erosion will have that effect in smoothing a surface down until it looks like a carefully constructed geometrically weird wall. It might help answer a lot of the questions about some of the structures that are built that we really don't have an answer as to how anybody could build them, including the shapes of the rocks and things like that. It's a simple time and erosion that might produce those types of shapes and patterns in volcanic rock. Getting back to the simulated aspect of all of this, when we're looking at the fact that we are in a physical realm and sort of being held here at frequencies that are unnatural compared to our requirements, our natural genetic requirements, or simply the fact that there's a trick being played on us that's telling us that we are physical bodies when we're not. And they're holding that trick in place to extract human labour and control us within a system that we really have to sort of look at how it came to be that a particular type of cold-hearted and cold-blooded creature could spring up in the world to deliberately do this to the entire global population, as if us being here in space, sort of this rock spinning at incredible speeds with no evidence of there being life on any other planet that we've been able to access information on, and the incredible arrogance that it must take to sort of see this creation of a world as being their own, and unto them, and something which they rule. And it really is archaic. It really is. It's very dinosaur era. It really is a very archaic mindset, considering human potential. And that when all of this is spun through the airwaves at the speed of light, we then have to look at a couple of things that I mentioned in the book, Simulation, the transcripts, in terms of how time works. And in the book we looked at time as an alternative way of thinking of it, as a vertical phenomenon that's sort of toroidal and cyclic, and that the only way that time can really exist is through perception, number one, as we all know. But also, obviously, when we notice movement and we measure the increments between those movements, we can sort of find the average and go, right, okay, well, there's 60 seconds in a minute of a day. And by the time the Earth turns and everything rolls back over again, it's this many hours, because we're observing something that's being presented to us through the airwaves as having a cyclic, time-coded base to it. Now, some of you, and I talked about this in the book, some of you may ask, well, but how is it possible to create a simulated experience today that all these people in the past have also experienced, and before the technology was built? And was it? Well, that's really only a relevant question if you see time as being horizontal. And given that there's not much effort, there's not much effort, but the results of theories and speculations and experiments with time haven't produced a result that we can call an alternative idea of time to the one that we've been presented with, which is linear. automatically the mind rejects the idea of something being created in the future, the linear future, which automatically creates the entire past of material physical history. And it can be difficult to understand that concept. But if you turn that into a vertical plane, because nobody said it had to be horizontal, if you turn that into a vertical plane and you actually have a look at the cyclic system of our solar system, there's nothing linear about it. So to even base time itself on a linear concept when we are not in a linear universe, we are in a cyclic universe, is probably highly erroneous and a big fat lie, which causes most of us to recoil at the suggestion that something in the future can affect the past. And we call these things future and past when they may be point A and point B within a simulated coded universe that we're being told to see, that we're being actually manipulated via different frequencies through the brain, telling our mind's eye that this is how the image is supposed to be interpreted. And of course, over time, we become embedded in this perception and we create our own things in this perception, and suddenly we're building physical things in this perception, and we start creating everything to load into this perception that we're being given, and we lock ourselves in. And then we create technologies that lock it in even further. And then one day something happens and they happen to shoot a signal at the wrong bit at the wrong time, likely through the core of a brain, or the etheric substance of the earth that is forming through the airwaves. And the jarring nature of it and the nuclear fusion of it slams the VPS, the energy rate, down to the physical formation of matter, simply through technology, the exact technology that is in the airwaves today, the exact same technology through supermergers and algorithmic clusters of data. Very difficult for a researcher to look into these things and ask the questions and stumble upon the answers and notice that there are way too many coincidences to ignore, and keep a scientific eye on the whole thing and make sure not to get carried away with lofty sort of assumptions. And I wish sometimes that I was, even though I was an honours student at school, I wish sometimes I was just that little bit more specialised in, say, anatomy and quantum physics. But from what I know of those fields, from what I do know, I can't find a flaw in what I'm saying to you now in terms of how that all comes together and is all highly possible and very simply done, simply by using the technology that we're using today. So if the future affects the past, or point A affects point B, and everything spins down into a very jarring physical lockdown of our energy. The question then is, how much of our natural landscape of the planet and how many ancient structures are shaped that way or apparently built that way, when they may in fact have been deposited from internet data in a physical format on the earth. It's one of the questions that I've asked about the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Not the older ones from the older kings, but the more recent ones, the Great Pyramid, of course. Hypothetically, for example, that could have been volcanic flow from millions of years ago, that has been eroded down in a hillside millions of years ago, that has been eroded down even further, covered with ice, eroded down even further, and in a crevice, a giant crevice, that ends up exactly like one of these volcanic stone rock walls that we see that are naturally formed. And the Egyptians find it, and it's sort of these huge blocks all over the place, and it looks like a pyramid. And they decide to carve into it and carve out the inside of it, and polish the walls. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but, you know, the carbon dating on it would likely suggest that it was built. But in terms of what we're talking about with geological formations, I think it's very interesting at least to keep that side of things in mind when we're looking at how something is formed or built. The Great Pyramid has clearly been built into the bedrock underneath it, and not all of it is made of huge stone blocks. And the interior has been polished, and they've placed large tiles over the floors, the walls and the ceilings to smooth out the surfaces. Either that, or they've polished it all and then they've simply chiselled in the appearance of large tiles. To me, it looks like a bathhouse for the pharaoh, since they bathed 4 times a day, which is another podcast altogether. But anyway, I just wanted to add that, just a short podcast from me. Very interesting times. We've got a technological world that's spinning out of control. The psychological assault and the brain damage on humanity is becoming more obvious every day, mainly because of the line of argument that people are presenting. There seems to be absolutely no ethics left, no respect, no ethics, no logical train of thought, no desire to connect with goodness, the moral ethic of a thing. And it really is a very, very sad indictment on the American technological industry, big tech, who have assumed that they can sell their technologies to other countries under their boot of being a superpower, and that they know what they're doing. Well, they don't. Everything that they are doing is completely harmful and destructive, not only of everybody else, but of their own country and of the people in their own country. And all of it is going to backfire big time. If there's an asteroid that hits, it will hit the United States of America and wipe them out, because that is what the simulation is pulling. That's what will happen to them. Just like 911, which is in the EBCDIC system. It was put out by IBM. It may even hit New York. It might be the big Independence Day Armageddon movie streaming in the airwaves that suddenly hits them with a huge asteroid, because that is what they are inflicting, firstly, on themselves with all of this technology. And digital ID is a massive human rights violation and a brain-damaging, hideous and disgraceful assault on the human genome. They cannot be allowed to get away with it. I think, considering most of us are disarmed, the public in other countries, I don't really see that it would be productive to confront our governments in such a way of violence, more that we must reject the technologies that are harming us. And it is every single technology that is broadcast through our airwaves. Every single one. Radio, television, and mobile internet. Every single one has to go. All the military stuff that should have always been kept within their own departments, and they should never have sold it to the public, and they should never have weaponised the public with their war technologies, and they should never have weaponised our social media networks with their presence, with direct connections to their government offices, with their constantly showing up in our faces every day of the week. This infection and this invasion into our innermost sanctums of our lives. The governments have placed themselves firmly there in every respect, in our airwaves and in our faces on social media every single day. And this has never been done by any other government on the earth ever in the history of mankind. This salivating, leeching, seething, invasive control that they're trying, this close to our skin position that they're trying to put themselves in every facet of our daily lives, right down to digital ID, to do the simplest things. And cashless societies. And all of this comes from the big tech industry because it helps them do business easier. It doesn't help us. They just want to sell it to us so they can make money. There's no justification for any of it, and our governments are falling for this line from the big tech giants who are acting like artificial intelligence is the best thing ever. Well, no, it's not. In my experience with it, it's completely stupid, destructive, and creates simulated reality for all humans, including them. They enjoy this low vibe, emotional seething and leeching off human beings to make money. So when it comes to Elon Musk, his rebranding of this network, his occasional comments that show who he really is underneath, just another reptile, and the holographic effect of UAPs in the airwaves in New Jersey, which is quite a heavy ley line area, all because of mobile internet. And even their defence department is throwing up their hands saying, we don't really know what's going on, we don't know what it is, they must just be hobby drones. And he sits there and he knows exactly why, and he's not saying anything. We're in a really sickening blowfly era of the underbelly of the beast that has devoured mankind through his selfishness, his greed, his gluttony, and his arrogance. These are very heavy energies that are coming to the surface and shoving themselves right in our faces for us to look at them squarely, to wake up out of the worship, to wake up out of the fanaticism, to wake up out of thinking that if we debate them online, it's going to make a difference and the rest of it. The only time that's going to make a difference is when millions of us do it all at once. Millions of us block them on social media. Millions of us fill their comment section with every abuse under the sun until they are shooed off and shooed out of our daily lives, until they turn their mobile technologies off. It is only something that can be demanded without question by we the people. And for every person out there with an iPhone addiction that doesn't want to do it, well, their destiny is not going to be a pretty one, because the only thing that's ever going to happen to them is pain and suffering. So that's the choice that we have to make. Do you want pain and suffering and struggle by staying connected to their reptilian system and their technologies? Or do you want a spiritual inheritance which allows you peace, abundance, joy, happiness, health by rejecting these mobile technologies and minimizing our connections to fiber optics and the internet, by restructuring the government to ensure that they stop selling war technology from these big tech people to the general public and stop coming after our children to try and control them into becoming them, which is also what they do. They subject us to every punishment and every brutality of the heart, mind, body and soul until they deform us into being like them, because that's what they want. They want everyone in the world to agree with them. Why else do you think they came on social media? To suck up and brainwash us into becoming like them. They are not interested in our welfare. They're not interested in our well-being. They're only interested in our potential and our freedom and our happiness. They don't care about any of those things. Their only interest in us is collecting the taxation, keeping us under control, and keeping us consuming. That is the only reason why they invented mobile internet to begin with, was to maximise the turnover, to make it faster and easier for those guys to make money. The fact of it is, one country is not difficult to run. Most of it can be self-sustained, a few good rules for everybody, freedom in communities, a very discreet government system that doesn't bother people every day, a very simple level of taxation that doesn't require billions of dollars simply to provide health and harmony, and some type of modest Defence Department. For that to all to come together in every country all over the world, the only way it's possible is to disconnect from mobile internet. Because as long as it's in the airwaves, it's controlling the way people think, it's controlling conflict scenarios, it's causing conflict scenarios, it's causing death, violence and despair. So we can go from looking at the entire history of civilization in the world, which the Middle Eastern cultures and in Peru and the Aztec cultures and Mayan and everything, civilisational in the sense that they started to civilize and build their own little empires. We can look at all of that and get to this point now and think, what is it that they're actually, where are they taking us to the point where the civilisational aspect of a society requires quantity over quality? What is that about? We get into all different kinds of conversations here. It's very complex, very simple at the same time, but ultimately, if we don't wake up and confront these people, it will come down to a cataclysmic event that occurs in some part of the world that wakes everybody up to the dangers of the technologies that we're using. And it is something that I doubt that they're going to open their minds to being highly likely. And because of them. Very interesting, challenging, and psychologically heavy times when all of these things are considered at once, at the same time. Simulated physical world, a simulated universe, a sky full of stars, also known as IP addresses, burning through the frequencies that it is being transmitted from within the coding of the simulation. It's all in there. It's all in there, with a heavy dose of everything on the internet, all jammed together in a big cluster algorithm. Anyway, that's all from me for now. Just a few more thoughts, something to think about, just trying to stay on top of it, to be honest. Very, very challenging ideas, very challenging concepts, something that I struggled with for the last 8 years, to the point where I tried not to think about it for 2 or 3 years, because the trauma of feeling trapped in the body, and knowing that can be alleviated if they turn off all the towers and all the transmitted broadcasts of information, and stop bashing us in the heads with this disgusting and ridiculously childish technological world and digital things and all this stuff. Frustrating, and very, very challenging. So anyway, please do have a look at the Ancient Cultures series, the ancient anatomical worship of all of those cultures. You'll find that it starts to cross-correlate into some of those areas where it's difficult to answer the questions as to why they shaped things a certain way, why they shaped jewellery a certain way, why they shaped little sculptures a certain way, why they built their monuments the way that they did, what they symbolise, what they represent. And it pulls us right back into focus that there were civilisations out there that found their identity in the workings of the inner brain as their identity as humans, and that this is what propelled them to stand firm and take ownership of their domains, and to build civilisations of commanding power. We just need to pull up at this point and realise that all the Bohemian Grove and the Skull and Bones and all the rest of it is just a little elite cult that is trying to mimic the ancient cultures, and keep the little secret to themselves with their little ram's horns, hand signals and stuff, like they're the only ones who know what it means. Well, that's not true anymore. Now we all know what it means. Our identity as humans. Possibly the little chip that got put in the back of our heads through the airwaves when all of this went down and shot nuclear fusion signal through the airwaves and through the core to leech off God and use life energy to create human life instead of releasing us from this, so that we can shed our carbon base, so that we can merge through as being light beings, so that we can have an alternate experience to this which is suffocating. Only a couple of decades ago, we still had options. We still had a means of going to a meditation centre and meditating and being able to have a legitimate experience, or even at home. Now we can't, because all the airwaves are chock-a-block with people's iPhones. They're suffocating us, so that we can't even have a proper spiritual experience, even when we're dreaming. Most of what we get happening in our dreams now is what's being carried on the frequencies in the airwaves as they hit us at octave levels, subharmonic levels, and how the brain has learned to pick all this stuff up. We're in prison, we're trapped, and you're welcome to disagree with me. I'm interested in having a conversation with anybody who's willing to have it. I invite you to contact me either on Twitter or via my channel, and we can have a conversation. I would love to do that. It is precisely what I believe, based on all the research over the last 8 years. And it's really difficult to know what to do with that and how to sort of go out and live in the world knowing that, and seeing children with iPhones and knowing that they are being abused. For every second that they hold it, that they are being abused by our own governments into becoming what they want them to be. It's very, very difficult, because of course you can't go around screaming at people and taking people's phones off them, or they lock you up. So I hope you're having a good holiday season, and I look forward to coming back again soon. I know I've said a few times this will probably be the last one I do for a while, but inevitably something comes up, or there's a new finding or a new consideration to factor in to the research so far, and I just want to be able to share that as we go. Then sometimes if it's not a full research file, it's better for me to do a podcast about it and have a bit of a chat about everything as it ruminates and the sediment of it settles to the bottom, so we can really examine that and the clear water on top to get some clarity of where we're heading. Thanks very much, guys. I'll catch you next time.